Good afternoon, dear participants. I am Kimberly Fernandez, and I am a counselor at Rosary College. I welcome you all to today's webinar, Male Mental Health, the Psychology of the Indian Male, organized by the Counselling Cell of Rosary College of Commerce and Arts, Navelim, Goa. Of late, the definition of what it means to be a man has challenged and redefined. As the structure of society is changing, so are our stereotypes and the conversations about conventional gender ideologies. Terms such as toxic masculinity and phrases such as real men cry have made us question the bygone opinions that were enforced on us by the society. The topic of male mental health has been forever shadowed by mainstream beliefs, such as men don't seek for help, they can handle anything, as opposed to a more benefiting belief such as nobody can do everything and it's okay to ask for help. This webinar is an initiative to change the beliefs we have about males and their mental health to more accepting, progressive, and less exhausting beliefs. Before we introduce our speaker for the webinar, a few announcements. The link to the feedback form will be shared at the end of the session. Make sure you all have your cameras off and your microphones on mute. We will have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions, please make sure you type them in the chat box below. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker for the day, Dr. Avinash D'Souza, consultant psychiatrist and psychotherapist. Dr. D'Souza is based in Mumbai and is the founder consultant of his many achievements. His notable initiatives include the Global Society for Digital Psychology and Indian Journal of Mental Health. Without further delay, I would request you to pin your screens to the speaker. Dr. D'Souza, I hand the session over to you.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Well, I'm very fond of Goa, though I have no property or no ancestral links to Goa, and I would love to probably come to your college one day physically in the post-COVID era and talk to you all. But nevertheless, in the current situation, all we can manage is a webinar, so I'm here. And the topic given to me is a very interesting topic, that is male mental health and the psychology of the Indian male. Now, the reason I chose this topic is because I'm a psychiatrist and I'm also a psychotherapist, and I see a large number of patients that come to my clinic, some male, some female, some couples, some married, some unmarried. And they very often come to me and talk about their most intricate problems, their issues. And there is a huge amount of stereotypical thinking, attitude that we have with regard to men. And I think there are certain things that, need to be sort of debunked, and there are certain things that need to be done away with. And we need to understand we're in an era where I don't think any gender is less. Both the genders are equal. These are roles which I think society has made the genders adorn, and that's how these stereotypical roles have come up. So I'm going to be talking to you about the psychology of Indian men. Now, well, I will probably be speaking for around half an hour to 35 minutes, following which we will have question answers. I would request that if you all have any queries that you all think of and you all want to ask, you can keep typing them in the chat box, and I will take them up at the end of my talk. And I promise to try and answer all the queries. Well, when we look at Indian men, okay, over the last 20 years of my practice, and yes, you could say that I maybe a little bit of a biased speaker because I'm a male myself, but I don't think that comes in the way. All my life, I think the last 2 decades, I have been working with psychologists, working in psychology, uh, where most of my team members have been ladies and feminine. And the reason being that most psychologists are feminine, we have very few male psychologists. And I have found them, of course, to be very hardworking, very sincere workers, very good team members, and we have excelled in a lot of things that we have done from an academic standpoint. What's also very important to know is, well, men differ from women. That's the first point. There's no arguments on that. Men differ from women when it comes to their thinking. Men differ from women when it comes to their beliefs. Men differ from women when it comes to the way they emote and express emotions. Men differ from women from the way they speak. Neurobiology, or the study of the brain, neuroscience rather, has elucidated or found that there are stark differences between the male brain and the female brain. So we start right over there. Even anatomically, men and women differ. We all know about biology. We all know that men have a Y chromosome, whereas females have two X chromosomes. We know about the fact that, yes, physically men look different and women look different, but even at a brain level, men and women differ. Now, there are certain differences which have been found in brain areas between men and women. So, most men talk less unless they belong to professions like mine where you have to talk the whole day. Otherwise, they say that the speech area in men, that is the Broca's area, the speech area of the brain, is around 3.5 times smaller in the male brain compared to the female brain. So on an average, men probably speak 40 to 45,000 words a day, whereas women probably speak 140 to 145,000 words a day. So invariably, the tussle is that most men are not expressive. They don't speak, they don't talk, because generally they're out of the house, and by the time they come home, they've already exhausted their 40,000 words. And when they come home and they have a wife or a girlfriend or somebody waiting to speak to them, they've already exhausted their word count. So their speech area is tired, fed up, jaded, and doesn't want to probably talk. And they have to engage in a conversation, which becomes difficult. And very often, that kind of a misunderstanding happens that he's not interested in speaking. And invariably, even with boyfriends and girlfriends, the girlfriend talks far more, the boyfriend talks less, and it's assumed that why is he not talking, and probably he's less interested. Similarly, it's also well known that the female brain has a listening area, the auditory receptive area is also far more enhanced. So if you go to a lady colleague, a lady friend with a problem, they would listen to you far better, far more than a male colleague would listen to you. And the reason is their listening centers are far more adept. So generally, if you go to a male with a problem, he'll be more concerned with only listening to the main points and summarizing the main points. And he'll very often tell you, talk fast, I don't have time, and this and that. But if you go to a lady colleague, she'd be very interested in listening to all the details. And that's what makes them definitely better when it comes to relationships, because they listen far more than their male colleagues. Well, the Indian male also differs from, I would say, Indian women, or I think men all over the world differ from women, because men have a memory center which I think is partly redundant. It doesn't really work well. So whenever couples have a fight, men have very little memory of what was said and what was done the next morning itself. Whereas if you look at ladies, they have a memory center which is far more enhanced. The memory center in the brain is the hippocampus, and it has been shown that the hippocampus is around 4.25 times larger in women than in men, and they store far more memories. That is why whenever a man emotes, he doesn't remember too many memories, but when a lady emotes, there is a lot of past memory that comes into their current speech and expression. And therefore, most women remember, that this happened on that day and this was said and that was said. And very often, I'm not saying it's a negative trait, it's just that they remember far more, whereas the males may not remember. Now, the second aspect of the Indian male is that it's normally assumed that the man is the tougher figure. This is what society has ascribed to the male. It's not that the male is necessarily tough, but it is something which society has ascribed, that the man is the tougher figure. He's supposed to be the protector. He's supposed to be the earner. He's supposed to be the person who's going to look after the lady. He's supposed to be the one who's going to earn. He's supposed to going to be the breadwinner. He's supposed to be going to go out and earn. So he's supposed to be tough and he can't get upset. But the truth is that men are sensitive. You do have men who are sensitive. You do have men who get affected. You do have men who may feel like crying. You do have men who get emotional. So there is nothing wrong if a man cries. One of the biggest psychological myths in Indian men is that the Indian man does not cry. As they say in Bollywood, mard ko dard nahi hota. The male shouldn't cry, but that's not true. The man equally emotes like the woman, and he can definitely cry if needed. He can definitely get emotional. He has a right to express himself emotionally. He has a right to describe what he feels. So it's very normal for the male to emote. There's nothing wrong at all if the male emotes. It's also normally assumed that the male is supposed to be the more aggressive person. That's again not true. Not all men are aggressive. Some men are aggressive, some are not. So you have men who are aggressive, and this probably happens because of aggressive parenting and because of aggressive upbringing and because of the fact that they are exposed to aggressive situations at home. And not all men are necessarily aggressive. Some are more passive, some are more submissive, some are more dominant, some are more aggressive. So there will be differences in the male as well. Is mental health and mental health issues more common in men? Definitely. I think men and women share an equal preponderance when it comes to mental health issues. But probably more women are brought for treatment. More men refuse to go for treatment. So that's what invariably happens. Deepak, can you just mute yourself, please?
Stop.
Yeah. So more men very often. Deepak Bovalkar will have to, I don't know, unmute. Yes, thank you. More men very often do not come for treatment compared to women. And the whole issue that happens is that men generally feel, going to a psychiatrist, going to a mental health professional, going to someone who is going to make them diagnose them or treat them is going to make them feel weaker. So the general tendency is that men do not go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. They are supposed to manage their problems on their own. Women are supposed to be weaker. They are not weaker. I'm not saying they are weaker. It is assumed by society that they are weaker and that they need help. So they go to a counselor. But today's era, I think we have a large number of males who come for help. I don't think the stereotype myth that men are weak, are strong and won't take help exists. There are many men that realize that we need help. Is depression more common in women than in men? Statistically and in epidemiological studies, yes. But I think depression is far more common in men, and it is something that has not been addressed. Depression is far more common when it comes to men, but they do not come for help. They do not seek treatment. They do not decide to go anywhere. And therefore, if you look at it, more men end up completing suicide because they don't know where to go. They don't want to seek help. And very often they may decide they want to end their lives. So they end up completing suicide more often, whereas more women may end up attempting suicide. So that's the way things are. It's also very important to realize that many men feel that they will look inferior if they seek psychiatric help or psychological help. Many men feel they will look that they are not able to manage their problems if they seek psychiatric help or psychological help, and hence they do not seek this help from anyone. The next issue when it comes to the Indian male is that Indian males are very attached to their mothers. You will get, of course, I would say, a bunch of Indian males that do not like their mothers and are attached to their fathers, but usually most Indian males are attached to their mothers. And they love to be pampered, they love to be mothered, they love to be looked after, they love to be taken care of, just like any mother would look after them, even from their spouse or girlfriend in a relationship. Though they may not express this very openly, but it is something that does happen. They loved to be babied and looked after, and they loved to be taken care of like a kid. And psychoanalytically, if you look at it, Indian males have been exposed to multiple mothers. So the maid servant, the auntie, the grandparent, the relative, the mother's sister. There have been multiple ladies who have looked after this male. So the concept of multiple mothers and multiple mothering is something which is there. For those who are interested and would love to read about Indian masculinity and psychoanalysis, there is a huge amount of it which has been written by an author named Sudhir Kakkar, who is in Goa itself, and a lot of his books talk about it. So Indian males, of course, have multiple motherings. Am I audible? I'm sorry, I had an internet issue. Am I audible now? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. While I spoke, I was talking about multiple mothers in the Indian male and the fact that they, love to be mothered in their relationships. Coming to some other facets of Indian masculinity, which is very important, is amongst the mental health issues, I think no issue worries the Indian male more than a sexual issue. Because I think for the Indian male, sexuality is very, very important because he believes that he has to be an optimal performer. He has to perform well. He has to be very good sexually. And that's what makes him male. So very often, I think that uh, Indian males get affected a lot when they develop a sexual problem. N number of times I've had Indian men that have come to me in clinics and have got affected because they've developed either an erectile dysfunction, or they've developed some ejaculatory issues, or they've developed some sexual problems. And they very often want a quick fix cure because they feel that their masculinity is challenged if they are unable to perform sexually. And this very often is a big problem. And if you look at even sexual disorders, you look at sexual disorder specialists, most sexual disorder specialists are more masculine. We very rarely have somebody who specializes in female sexual dysfunction. So male sexual dysfunction is always highlighted more. Male sexual problems are always highlighted more. So therefore, one of the main issues with the Indian male is a sexual issue worries him far more than any other issue. How do men and women differ in therapy settings? Well, I think men generally take far more time to get used to a therapist and converse in therapy settings. So they are not the type who will come into the first session and open up and start talking and discussing. No, it doesn't really happen. They normally need a little more time because they first need to build rapport with their therapist, irrespective of the gender of the therapist. And once they have achieved that rapport, it's only then that they open up. But when you look at female patients in therapy, they generally tend to develop rapport a lot easier. They tend to open up and speak a lot easier. So very often, they are more, I would say, conversant in therapy, whereas you have male patients who don't like to talk so much. They don't like to express their emotions so much in therapy. They prefer to be quieter. So you need to probe more, talk to them more, make them feel comfortable, make them realize that you're on their side, and then probably they open up in therapy. And they are at times a little uncomfortable with, say, even a male therapist. So they prefer to have a female therapist. That's what I have generally noticed. And they generally open up better because they look at the female therapist as someone who will understand them and empathize with them and speak to them. And that's what generally does happen. Now, another issue when it comes to teenage boys and girls, it's very important to understand when you look at the Indian male. Most Indian males have not had very candid, open, expressive conversations with their fathers, because most fathers have not had conversations with their own fathers. So very often when it comes to the father-son relationship, the father is put on this pedestal as though he's supposed to be the main person in the house. And therefore you can't really open up and speak to him. You can't really talk to him much. He's supposed to be a disciplinarian. He's supposed to be someone who's going to provide for everyone. So you can't get pally or friendly with your father. There are very few men who share very friendly relationships with their father. Not everyone does. So one of the things is that many of them get pally with maybe other people, with friends and other, maybe even some other elders, but they are not very pally with their fathers. And there is that anxiety when it comes to speaking to their dad, going against their father, going against what the father wants, going against what others may want. So there's generally that little bit of anxiety, which I call is not even a social anxiety. It's more of a paternal anxiety, and anxiety towards going wrong when it comes to speaking to the father. So very often they don't share open relationships with their fathers, and they have also not received any kind of knowledge about life, sexuality, living, relationships, etc. from their fathers, because they've never really had open, candid conversations with their dad. So this is something which I think is a very common thing that we see in the Indian male psyche. What's also very important in the Indian male psyche is it depends on what position, birth order wise, the male is born into. So if the male is the firstborn, let's say he's the first child, he's supposed to be the most mature. He's supposed to assume responsibilities a lot earlier. He's supposed to basically be there and learn and probably understand, and he's probably supposed to, manage all the other siblings. So all these things are very, very important. It's also important as, um, if he's a middle person, the middle child, let's say the second or the third child, then of course his responsibilities are far less. And if he's the youngest child, then very often he is sort of pampered and, kept that way. So he may not assume responsibilities because he has other people to assume responsibilities for him. So the birth order of the male child is also something which is very important when it comes to masculinity and the Indian male. Another very important facet about the Indian male is that he earns. So he thinks it's his right to probably drink, it's his right to probably smoke, it's his right to probably do what he wants. So very often in many relationships, there is a divide between the couple because the male becomes extremely dominant. The male becomes extremely adamant because he is the earning member. And because he is the earning member, he sort of prefers or he wants to probably be part of in charge. And when he wants to be in charge, he believes since he earns, he has every right to spend on himself. He has every right to probably drink or smoke. And very often that's why we see substance abuse to be far more in Indian men generally than women. Women, from a societal perspective, from a social perspective, generally don't drink. They generally don't smoke. Though now I think we see a large number of women also who smoke and drink. But still, substance abuse patterns generally have a male preponderance, which is generally far more important. And we sadly, I think, belong to a society which is very patriarchal. That is, there's a huge emphasis on being elder and being the parent and being paternal. So there's a society which is patriarchal. There's a society which is heterosexist. So they believe in male dominance and they believe that, yes, heterosexual relationships are predominant, and a society which is homophobic. So there are many men who probably have alternate sexualities but never really come out with it. There are many men who belong to the LGBTQ plus community who are forced to get married because one of the myths is that, okay, if you get married, you'll probably change your sexual orientation, which doesn't happen. They get married for the purpose of society. They may even have children, but they continue to remain and maintain their homosexual orientation. So this is something also which we see a lot. When it comes to the Indian male, I think the male generally neglects not only his mental health, but I think also neglects his physical health. So you have a large amount of diabetes, you have a large amount of blood pressure, you have a large amount of stroke, you have a large amount of multiple other things that worry the Indian male apart from mental health issues. And this very often, results in a lot of pent up emotion that remains within. And this results in a lot of issues, that come up. This can result in psychosomatic conditions that come up. So a lot of men develop skin infections, a lot of men develop acidity, a lot of men develop arthritis, a lot of men develop bronchial asthma, a lot of men develop thyroid issues. The reason being is that their pent-up emotions remain within and that's never expressed. And because their pent-up emotions remain within and is never expressed, this results in what we call a phenomenon referred to as alexithymia. Alexithymia is when you are unable to express your emotions, and your emotions get expressed through physical organs of your body, resulting in medical conditions. So a lot of men develop heart problems also. A lot of men also develop various other medical conditions, which are all part of the alexithymic process. So that is also something which is, I think, part of the Indian masculinity or the Indian whole process. Even when I think men come for couples therapy, there is this huge ego in admitting that we are wrong. There is this huge ego in admitting that they've been at fault. Many men like to put the blame on the other partner. Many men like to put the blame on the female. They like to put the blame on the relationship. They like to put the blame on multiple other factors. So absolution or being absolved of doing wrong is something which they love to probably do, because they feel, I don't want to be blamed. It's not my fault. It's not my this thing. So very often there is this whole feeling of being absolved from being blamed, that okay, I did not go wrong. So they would love a therapist who tells them, no, you're not to blame. They do not like a therapist who blames them. So they do not like to take the blame very often. So that's something. Though, yes, there are men who are also apologetic. There are also men who sort of understand that they are wrong. There are men who understand that, yes, I can make a mistake, but there are very few men who do. And there are very few men who admit that they made a mistake openly. So also male friendships are very different from female friendships. Male friendships are, I would say, open. They are, less competitive unless both like the same girl. They are not dependent on each other in the form of regularly staying in touch or talking, but the friendship still maintains. But when it comes to female friendships, there is a lot of talking, there is a lot of sharing, there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of contact needed, not necessarily physical contact, but verbal contact for the relationship to be maintained. So, and there's a lot of comparing and contrasting that very often happens in female relationships. Also, I think men in India take separation very badly. For them, separating from a marriage hurts. They may not express it, but it does causes a lot of pain to them. It does causes a lot of suffering to them. Also, this results in a lot of anguish, a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, and they may never ever express it. So they need to be probed a lot in therapy. They need to be made emotional in therapy, even if it means that they have to end up crying. It's absolutely fine. That emotional catharsis is needed very often by men, and it's only when they probably go through that catharsis or that cathartic process probably is their therapy more successful. In the end, I just want to state two or three things, that primarily that men are different from women. There's no doubt about it. Men have to be handled with a lot of care compared to women. Women also need care. They also need love. They also need affection. There's no denying that. But men need a lot of care, which is not given to them, assuming that they are a man and they don't need it. Very often what happens in relationships is men do not express themselves, and neither do partners encourage them to express themselves. So it's very important that partners encourage them to express themselves. It's also very important that partners speak to their male partners very commonly, discuss about what they want to do. I think one of the things which many men have to realize in a relationship is that it's very normal to have divergent views. It can happen that there are two people who think differently, yet they love each other. It can happen that there are two people who do not agree on a point, yet they love each other. So this difference in opinion is something that can exist. This difference in opinion is something that can be there. So it's something which I feel is very, very important, and is something that we need to understand, that men need to understand, that it can happen in relationships. Not agreeing is absolutely okay. Not agreeing does not mean that the relationship is on the rocks. Similarly, I think many men also need to know how to end relationships well. They do not, of course, like to be told that the relationship is ending. They do not like to feel dumped, they do not like to feel hurt, but they must also have the courage to end a relationship well, so that there is no guilt, negativity, etc. left at the end of the relationship. Because there's a lot of anger that comes into men when they are rejected. There's a lot of anger that comes into them when they are sort of ending a relationship. And this results in a lot of issues. Now, while we have discussed all this, I think it's very important for us to understand that men and women differ, like I told you. And the Indian male is evolving. So we have some Indian men there are different types of Indian men that you see. One who's very dominant in a relationship, two who's very submissive in a relationship, three whose focus is only on finances and earning and doesn't really care about family, etc. So the career oriented male is what is there. We also have the fact that you very often may see certain men who do nothing and they live off their wife's income. So you have that kind of a man also. You also have men who are very aggressive. You have men who are very timid. You have men who are very caring. You have men who don't care at all. So all sorts of men, they come in all shapes and sizes, all colors and all races and all religions. And that's what makes up the Indian masculinity. I think the multicultural bouquet that is seen in India is what results in various diverse manifestations of masculinity. And nevertheless, I think men need to be cared for. Men need to look after themselves as much as they need to be looked after by others. And I think that would be a huge step ahead to improve the psychology of the Indian male. Yeah, that's all I would like to say. And I thank the college for inviting me. And I would be more than happy to take up questions, which I think I can start right away. So Ankit has asked me that as per the latest, I'm going to go to the chats and take the questions. So Ankit says, as per the latest NCRB suicide research conduct, it says that suicide rates in men are 3 times more than women. And the reason in men suicide is family problems, which is 32%. Well, I think family problems are there even in women. It's not that. And the issue here is that suicide rates are far more common in men because they end up completing suicide, whereas more women end up attempting suicide. And family problems alone, I don't think, are the cause. There are multiple other financial issues, personal issues, personality issues. It's all very often blamed on the family. Ramya Warrior wants to know what could be the reason that men have the tendency to not like being blamed or anything. Hence, the concept of male ego is developed. I think the whole fact is that men feel that, we are superior. It's a thought. It's a wrong thought. They feel that we can't go wrong. They feel that I'm in charge and they feel I'm dominant. And that's why they feel that I can't be blamed. And that's how the concept of male ego has come up. Royston Briganza says that to normalize the fact that men can emote, it would require a larger systemic change beginning from the grassroots. While we do have sections of society that are progressive, there are also groups who conform to the more regressive notions of masculinity. How do we, as a part of larger society, change this? I think it starts with us. So let your generation work on this. Let your generation be better parents, better masculine parents, better male parents, better fathers. Change the male stereotypes. Let us have non-stereotypical gender parenting. And I think that will go a long way. So if you all started, probably the next few generations will reach there. That's what I can say. If there are any more questions, please type them out in the chat box and I'll be more than happy to take them.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, could I read some of them?
Please.
Yeah. So my first question is, Indian laws are mostly women-centric. And while we acknowledge that the percentage of crimes against women are higher than the percentage of crime against men, and so these laws were created basically to protect women, they also seem to impose the notion that men cannot be victims, they cannot be manipulated, or that they cannot be vulnerable. So, which brings us to the need for gender neutral laws in India. So, would the introduction of such laws help men to be upfront with their harassment and the consequences they undergo?
Well, I think we definitely need gender neutral laws. I won't deny that, because it's not always the male that is at fault, though in many cases the male may be at fault. But I have seen cases where I think even women are to blame. So I think gender neutral laws would be perfectly fine. I'm not saying that. The woman has no right to expression. She does have, and if she suffers, she shouldn't suffer unnecessarily. But there are many relationships where I have seen the male hasn't done anything and he yet continues to suffer out of the fear that if he tries to go to court or tries to go and seek justice, the laws will be turned against him. So I think we definitely need gender neutral laws, and I think law agencies will have to look into that. I have a question here in the chat that Sherlock
Yes.
has mentioned that in the social perspective, men and women are different, and this has been beautifully explained in the webinar, focusing on the psychology of the Indian male. But when it comes to the metaphysical level, like the religious perspective, there is male dominance in religiosity at the same time, and even the gods are male dominated. How can we see this from a psychological point of view? Well, Sherlock, I would love to answer you, but unfortunately, I haven't been involved in the genesis of the Catholic Church or any other religions, and I haven't been involved in writing the Bible, so I really can't explain that. But yes, I think if you look at religions, we do have goddesses as well. If you're pointing to any specific religion, you may explain that further. But otherwise, I think yes, we do have this, and I think. Uh, Even the male dominance in religiosity is slowly dwindling away. So, and it probably will take a few years, but it will go away. Yes.
So, yeah. So, my next question for you is, from your years of experience, could you share your insight into toxic masculinity and how it can make relationships difficult?
Well, I think, see, my whole concept of toxic relationship is any relationship where you don't have space to breathe. Okay, it's as simple as that. So there are many relationships where the man is overtly uh, possessive, overtly paranoid, overtly suspicious, aggressive, violent, verbally hurting, if not emotionally hurting, if not physically abusive. And I think many women are afraid to get out of that relationship because the man threatens them that if you leave me, this will happen and that will happen. So they continue to remain in that toxic relationship, and sometimes children being born may be another reason for that. So I think it's very important that no one should rather suffer a toxic relationship. And if you are in a toxic relationship, you need to break free, because it's important that you break free. Otherwise, you're always going to be you're always going to feel that you had that chance and you never took it. Kimberly DeCosta wants to know, why is it that men hide their emotions? Because I think from a young age, they have never been allowed to express their emotions. They've always been told, boys don't cry, and you're a boy, you're strong, you're not a girl. And they've very often been told that, you don't really talk about your emotions. Girls talk about emotions. That's a stereotype which has been put into them. So therefore, I think men hide their emotions. And men have been told, you look weak if you get emotionally expressive.
So, we have a question on YouTube here.
Yeah.
So, it asks, which books by Dr. Sudhir Thakur would you recommend to better understand the psyche of the Indian male?
Well, I think he's written a book known as The Indian Psyche itself, which is something that you can, go through. There are multiple books written by him, but The Indian Psyche is one book which he's written. Another book which you can read is a book by Salman Akhtar. He is a Pakistani writer who's also a psychoanalyst, but he's based in the UK. He's written a book called Freud Along the Ganges. You should read that book. Well, someone has asked me a question that boys say trust me, but later they act as though they don't know us. Well, I think the question is asked by Ume Ifaza. Well, Ume, I think sadly, probably you've been with the wrong boys. I think good boys aren't like that. They say, trust me, and they continue to be with you. So if you probably have been with people who have acted this way, you need to learn and be wise and choose for future relationships.
So, my next question. On one hand, we have younger generations being more open to mental health and who are more accepting of their identity through, though it could defy social norms. Whereas we see this undercurrent still of mocking men when they are vulnerable. So a case in point is now a picture of Will Smith crying turned into a meme shared across the internet. So as a mental health professional, what change would you introduce and implement across younger generations to banish the stigma surrounding males and their mental health?
I think, relationship education is something which is important. Boys and girls at a young age, teenagers, adolescents, are not taught how to handle relationships. They're not taught how to manage relationships. They're not taught about marriage. They're not taught about love. They're not taught about managing breakups, etc. So I think that's something which is very important. And they also have to be taught about emotional expression and handling emotions and resilience, how to get strong. So if I think we focus on these things, it will be very easy to sort of eliminate these stigmas.
Do we have any more questions? Participants, if you all have any more. Okay.
Yes, Abhinay Pai has written in that usually with an argument between men and women, it is found that women require the man to be sorry or apologize for the same. Can this be classified as a female ego? Well, Abhinay, I think sometimes it may just be that the female is right. It's not that I would call it a female ego. It's just that she's correct. In case you feel she isn't right and is demanding this, well, you can say, yes, it's being a bit adamant. I wouldn't want to use the word female ego, male ego very loosely, but I would rather say that sometimes a woman may stand her ground because she's right. It may not necessarily be that, she wants the man to be sorry and feel dominant. Supriya has asked, how do we curb the stigma that men cannot be expressive? I think I've already answered that. You need to teach them to express emotions. You need to teach them to handle relationships. You have to encourage them to cry. It's absolutely fine. There's no harm in that.
Do we have any more questions?
We have one more question.
Yeah.
Why do men that study in co-ed institutions understand men better than convent educated?
Understand women better, you mean? Is it understand men better or understand women better?
Why do men that study in co-ed institutions understand men better than convent educated?
I don't think, I think men always seem to try and understand men. So I don't think the co-ed or the convent educated institutions matter. But I think men who study in a co-ed institution, I think they understand women far better because they've been exposed to girls from an early age versus someone who's only been in a male dominated institute. So that kind of a thing is definitely there. And the reason is, I think, the lack of exposure to the female gender. That is one. Juliana has asked me a question. What is the reason behind when a man says that they do not like clinging people or girlfriends? Well, I think most men don't like to be touchy, and most men generally do not like to get lovey-dovey, and they pretend that they don't like it. But to be very frank, they enjoy it. So I think, when they say they don't like clinging people, they don't want someone who's going to probably, be more of baggage on them. They would love someone who pampers them. So that's what would be there. Renoksha writes that, as mentioned by you earlier, about the different types of personality, such as career-driven and aggressive and so on. How would you tackle such personalities without the factor of changing the person? I think I would put forward the personality flaws to the person and tell him that there are areas where we would like you to improve upon. And if he improves upon, fair enough. If he doesn't improve upon, then I think people in that relationship will have to take a call about what they want to do. What is the reason behind men dicing or ditching? I don't know what you want to mean. Their girlfriend because of their mother. I didn't follow the word dicing. You'll have to be more clear. Okay, breaking up. So you mean ditching their girlfriend because of their mother? I don't think it usually happens. Why would they want to ditch the girl because of the mother, unless the mother is getting too intrusive and too interfering in the relationship, which obviously I think no one would like. But otherwise, I don't see any reason why this should happen. And if it does happen, maybe he's a mama's boy and he doesn't want to leave the mother.
Do we have any more questions? Okay, a few announcements before we sign off. The feedback link will be emailed to you and shared on the WhatsApp group, which will be open until the 28th of November. And you will receive your e-certificates by the 28th of November. On behalf of Rosary College of Commerce and Arts, I, Kimberly Fernandez, would like to thank Dr. Avinash D'Souza for the very enlightening session on male and their mental health, for your valuable time and the efforts you have put in today's webinar. We would also like to thank